This is Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor during the 119th Congress. On June 12th, Senator Thune discussed the HALT Fentanyl Act to permanently reclassify fentanyl analogs a day after the House passed the bill. The Senate later held more votes in processing the Genius Act that would regulate stablecoins. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, later today, our friends in the House will be voting on the HALT Fentanyl Act. This is important legislation, and I'm glad that it will soon be on its way to the President's desk. I don't need to tell anybody about the terrible impact of drug overdoses in this country, many of them caused by fentanyl. More Americans die of drug overdoses each year than the number of Americans who died in the entirety of the Vietnam War. Just 3 years ago, the New England Journal of Medicine estimated that we were losing 22 teenagers every week to drug overdoses. 22 teenagers every week. It's like losing an entire high school classroom week after week. And no part of this country has been spared from the influx of fentanyl. We've certainly seen it in my home state of South Dakota. Enough fentanyl was seized in Sioux Falls, South Dakota last year to kill 2.5 million people. Law enforcement reports that the cartels have a presence in our area. And the price of a single pill has dropped from $40 a few years ago to just $5 per pill today, largely due to the growing supply. Mr. President, as bad as this situation is today, it was much worse a few years ago. Before 2018, the fentanyl analogs that were killing so many Americans were generally classified as Schedule II substances, meaning regulations were less stringent and violations carried lighter penalties. And if a particular analog was moved to Schedule I, the cartels would simply alter the chemical composition slightly, which meant the new analog wasn't subject to stricter enforcement, even though it was no less deadly. But that ended in 2018 when the Trump administration temporarily reclassified all fentanyl analogs under Schedule I. And Congress has extended that temporary reclassification several times because it works. Mr. President, now it's time to make that permanent. That's where the HALT Fentanyl Act comes in. It will permanently classify fentanyl analogs as what we know them to be, the deadliest kind of drugs. And it will ensure that law enforcement has an important tool to go after the people bringing this poison into our country and peddling it in our communities. Mr. President, I want to thank Senators Cassidy and Johnson and Chairman Grassley for their leadership on this issue and for getting this bill to this point. I expect today's vote in the House will be broadly bipartisan, as it was in the Senate, and it will soon be signed into law by President Trump, all made possible by their efforts. Mr. President, the HALT Fentanyl Act has drawn support from law enforcement officers and state attorneys general. And perhaps most significantly, it has the support of the families of numerous Americans who have died from fentanyl overdoses. And I'm grateful to those families for their passionate advocacy on this issue and on passage of this bill. Mr. President, the HALT Fentanyl Act is just one step in the fight against the scourge of fentanyl. In the coming weeks, we'll be taking up legislation to address another aspect of the fight, securing our borders. Much of the fentanyl in our country comes across an international border. So securing our borders is a key step to preventing shipments of this poison from getting into our country in the first place. And the bill we'll be voting on in the coming weeks will make a generational investment in border security, including finishing the border wall and investing in personnel and technology to stop illegal aliens and illegal drugs from getting across. Mr. President, too many Americans have lost their lives to drug overdoses. And so many of those deaths were caused by a single pill containing a lethal dose of fentanyl. Republicans will continue our efforts to end this crisis and prevent illegal drugs from getting into our country and devastating our communities.
Schumer took his floor time to criticize President Trump's second-term trade strategy with China as incoherent and chaotic. A gun silencer provision in the budget reconciliation package soon pending, oppose former Missouri Congressman Billy Long's nomination to lead the IRS, and more. Long was later confirmed by 53 to 44.
Mr. President, I don't often agree with the conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board, but they had it right this morning in their op-ed. They said Trump has no China trade strategy. That's what the Wall Street Journal said. Trump has no China trade strategy. I agree. Trump has no China trade strategy. Yesterday, President Trump shouted from the mountaintops that a trade deal with China has been, quote, done. But in reality, nothing of the sort happened. It's typical Trump. He just makes things up that he thinks please himself and pleases his right wing for the moment. In truth, Donald Trump struck a feeble truce and calls it a victory. In fact, calling this a truce, calling it feeble, would be putting it kindly. Donald Trump's actions with China and the handshake yesterday accomplished virtually nothing. China has outfoxed him, and we are just back where we started. After months of Donald Trump trying to talk tough on China, China today has more leverage over the U.S. than when Trump started on this venture. Donald Trump's trade war has been a colossal failure and a chaotic mess with virtually nothing to show for it. Donald Trump should go back to the drawing board and start over and come up with a plan that actually goes after China by joining with our allies instead of going to war with them, by having them be allies with us to put pressure on China. And that will make action against China much tougher and more successful, instead of what Trump did, alienating our allies and having them ally with China rather than us. And Donald Trump should tell Mr. Navarro to get another job. This man has had terrible advice in Donald Trump's first term and now in Donald Trump's second term. 2 months since America's supposed Liberation Day, it's clear that Donald Trump's trade strategy is not working. And his main problem is that he doesn't have a coherent strategy at all. Donald Trump's only move seems to be creating chaos. It's as if he wakes up in the morning and picks a country out of the hat, just pops into his head and runs with it. No strategy, no coherence, no understanding or appreciation of what occurred the day before or might occur the day after. He's turned markets manic, and he's paralyzed business. Business leaders you talk to from one end of America to the other, big business, medium-sized business, small business, say they are paralyzed. They can't move because they don't know what he's going to do next on tariffs. And given how erratic and inconsistent he has been, who can blame them? One Kentucky small business owner, a Trump supporter who runs a baseball goods company, described this trade war as, quote, a vacation from hell to millions of American businesses. That's exactly what's happened. This is a vacation from hell, self-imposed by Donald Trump. As summer break begins and families start traveling around the country, that is exactly what Americans are feeling as well. A vacation from hell, thanks to Donald Trump's tariff policies. On snap cuts. After Senate Republicans spent weeks promising they would moderate the extreme policies in Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill, last night they doubled down. The Senate Agriculture Committee released the text of their portion of the bill, and the cuts to food assistance are as cruel, harmful, and as extreme as what came out of the House. They gave it a fresh coat of paint and pretended it's somehow more moderate, when in reality it's not. What happened to all those Republicans, the Senate Republicans, who said they wanted to moderate the House's snap cuts? The plan they came up with is the House bill's twin evil with a slightly nicer suit. It would still be the most aggressive cuts to food assistance in American history. Hundreds of billions in cuts, just as punitive as when it came out of the House. 8 million Americans, 3 million children and seniors would be in danger of losing benefits. States would still carry the burden in a way they never have had to before, and Republican state governors are going to start complaining, let me assure our Republican colleagues. Under the Senate plan, A state like North Carolina could be penalized $438 million in 2028. States have to balance their budgets. A blow like this would be crippling, forcing states to make impossible decisions about who gets to keep their food benefits and who will be forced to go hungry. I urge Senate Republicans to throw this latest plan away. It's not moderate at all. Again, the Senate's SNAP proposal is basically the House version's proposal, evil twin, dressed in a slightly nicer suit. And one other thing, to take food out of the mouths of hungry kids, all they want is to fill their little tummies, and give it to tax cuts to billionaires? How perverse, how cruel, even vicious. Even vicious. And then they come up with these shibboleths. Oh, people aren't working. Oh, people are cheating. They have no proof. They just cut. It's mean. It's against what our scriptures teach us. And this, feeding the hungry, giving drink to the poor, to the thirsty, should not be a political issue, should not be a partisan issue. It should be a moral issue. On SNAP cuts, I did that already. On guns. As we speak, Republicans are once again trying to jam through a reckless, extreme giveaway to the gun lobby, a provision that will endanger our kids, betray law enforcement, lead to more gun deaths. Despite their so-called big, beautiful bill, Republicans snuck in a radical measure to reverse nearly a century, 100 years of common-sense gun rules on silencers. Senate Democrats will fight this dangerous provision with every tool at our disposal, including trying to strike it in the birdbath. Parents don't want silencers on their streets. Police don't want silencers on their streets. The only ones who do? The gun lobby. And that's exactly who this provision is written for. Silencers have been used in mass killings, murderers, lawbreakers. They're the ones who want silencers. And they've been used in targeted assassinations, in crimes where bystanders didn't even know gunshots had been fired until it was too late. There's nothing common sense about making these deadly devices easier to buy, easier to make, easier to use in crimes. To the extreme Republicans, they're extremists these days, who slip this silencer sneak attack into their bill, shame on you. Shame on you for putting the gun lobby over the lives of our kids. Shame on you for endangering families and law enforcement. All the law enforcement people I speak to don't want this Republican proposal because they know that the people who want silencers are the criminals who our brave police and others are fighting. Shame on you, Republican right wing, and all the Republicans, even when they know they're wrong, who go along with that right wing, for adding fuel to America's gun epidemic. As I said, police departments across America have been clear. Silencers make their jobs harder, delaying response times, making it harder to catch criminals, harder to solve gun crimes, and yes, easier for criminals to get away with murder. You cannot call yourself pro-law enforcement while voting to put more silencers in criminals' hands. If Republicans get their way, it'll be open season for criminals with silencers. Senate Democrats will fight this provision at the parliamentary level and at every other level with everything we've got. On the IRS nomination today, this one's another doozy. Senate Republicans want to put a tax fraudster in charge of the IRS. Let me repeat that. Senate Republicans want to put a tax fraudster in charge of the IRS. And I wish that was just a figure of speech. But in a little over an hour, Senate Republicans will vote on the confirmation of William Long to be the commissioner of the IRS. I will vehemently oppose Long's nomination. To have a tax fraudster and swindler like Mr. Long in charge of the IRS is abominable. It shows the only thing Donald Trump cares about is helping cheaters and liars get ahead, while leaving honest, hardworking families in the dust. Mr. Long's background has nothing that makes him qualified to be IRS commissioner. His only qualification, like so many of Trump's nominees who've had no experience, no knowledge, is that he's a MAGA cheerleader. He had no expertise in tax policy while in Congress. After he left office, he joined the tax scam industry. In one instance, Mr. Long was paid over $60,000 by firms that sold totally fabricated tax credits to investors and small businesses. When asked about his role in this scheme, when in committee, Long refused to answer. When investigators sent him questions, he went dark. After Long's nomination was announced, the CFO of the company that swindled those businesses told its investors not to worry. They'll soon have a buddy at the IRS who will take off the heat. This is rank corruption. Donald Trump naming someone as compromised as Mr. Long is just allowing corruption to be winked at, nodded at, and even approved. Under Mr. Long, the IRS will become the Department of MAGA crooks. Donald Trump will use the IRS, as he's used other agencies, to punish his political opponents, to help cheaters and tax evaders, all while hardworking families watch billionaires pay less in taxes. I implore Senate Republicans to reject Long from being IRS commissioner. And finally, on broadband. Last Friday, Secretary Lutnick and the administration delayed nearly $43 billion in funding to help 25 million Americans get access to affordable high-speed internet. This funding is vital for kids to do their homework and for families to stay connected. States have worked hard to get this funding program up and running, but now, to help Starlink, we know who owns that, the administration has thrown everyone back to square one. Donald Trump seems to find endless ways to go after states like New York, and this decision delaying broadband funding does just that. It'll endanger $660 million in funding to help the hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers, many in rural areas, Republican districts, who lack broadband access. I joined with Ranking Member Cantwell and Senator Lujan urging the administration not to delay this funding, but they did it anyway. It's shameful, and I'll keep pushing the administration to change course. I urge the Trump administration, don't turn your back on rural families lacking broadband just to help Starlink.
This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast. You can watch live action from Congress on our YouTube channel at FedNet TV.